Hey, Halls Hill family. Here on my porch on Halls Hill is Mr. Sidney Williams, a son of Halls Hill. And I just wanted him to come in and talk to us a little bit about his life on Halls Hill growing up, how his family got here, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the radicalism that Sidney displayed for us in helping some of us youngins learn how to stand up for ourselves. So Sidney, welcome to hallshill.com. Tell us a little bit about your family and how they got to the Hill.
Well, as far as I know, my grandfather was already here because he already had the medical practice, the doctor's practice on Lee Highway.
And so who was your grandfather?
Dr. Edward T. Morton.
And where was he living?
He was living at 4842 Lee Highway, right where the McDonald's is.
All right.
By Langston School.
And so he was the first black doctor here in Halls Hill?
Yes, he was.
All right. So what do you remember about those times when you were a kid?
Well, it's funny because I always thought that downstairs in the basement was where he had his office. And I thought that was like where Frankenstein was made up, and every time I went down there, it just meant pain because he always wanted to give me a shot. So I was scared to death of that, but people always came and they talked very highly of him, and they would bring farm produce to pay him because there wasn't a time when black people had a lot of money, so he took whatever you could give him, and if you couldn't give him anything, he still treated you. So he was a doctor to all the people, and not only in Halls Hill, to all the surrounding areas.
Now, I remember when I was writing the book, I asked you about whether you knew that he had run for the county board in the 1930s. And you said that you didn't remember, but I went back and it was quite a invigorating time for the news people and for the media at that time and for the folks, because there hadn't been a black person to run for county board in a long time. Do you think, what about your grandfather that you think made him make that decision?
Well, what I did find out about my grandfather and what I knew about him is he was part of the Marcus Garvey Back to Africa movement, and not many people knew that. A lot of radicalism came exactly from him because he was a pioneer, and he was he broke down barriers that were otherwise inhibiting black people or keeping black people from progressing. And he was a progressive person. He teamed up with one of the local pharmacists in the area and developed a cough syrup that was really good. Everybody used it. He just didn't patent it, and he lost out on that. But when I looked at Marcus Garvey and his movement and connected that with my grandfather, a lot of things began to fall into place.
Nice, nice. So talk about your mom and your aunt and your grandfather's children, because they were influential on Halls Hill.
Well, education was a key. It was stressed. Education and athletics. I don't know if anybody knew, but my grandfather was a track star when he was in college also. So athletics was, I remember when I was born, and this is told to me, but my grandfather bought me a football, a basketball, and a baseball, and a glove, and I couldn't even wear any of those things, but I had them before I even was able to walk. So, and as far as reading, he had an extensive library, so as I was growing up, in order for me to get out of the yard in the summertime, I had to read a novel and do a book report. So, The Three Musketeers and Swiss Family Robinson, Robinson Crusoe, Count of Monte Cristo. I can remember them because there was a lot of days I was crying not wanting to read those books, but they didn't give me any break with that. I had to read them, and I had to do the report, and if the report wasn't right, they'd do it again.
Awesome, awesome. Now go back to your mom and your aunt.
See, my mother was...
your mother's name, so everybody might not know.
My mother was Muriel Williams, and my mother was sort of a free spirit, and not a lot of people knew that, but and my father was the direct opposite. He wasn't a free spirit. Everything was rigid, had to be in place. My mother was like, live your life, enjoy your life. Anyway, but my mother was in college. I think she was at DC Teachers, and I think she got pregnant with me. and she didn't complete college, but she pledged AKA. Never became an AKA. She was an eternal Ivy, I guess that's what you would call her. But still, like I said, it was education. My mother exposed me to everything. I would go to symphonies. I would go to art galleries. I would read books, as I said. She just let me experience all the things that she felt that I need, and told me that education was the key. My aunt was the same way. And my aunt taught in the same elementary school, which was John M. Langston, which I attended, which where my father was also the custodian at John M. Langston. So that was rough, because anytime I mess up in class, which was very few, but if I did, that meant they sent me downstairs to my father in the boiler room. You can be sure I didn't mess up anymore.
Yes, and your aunt's name is Miss Stewart.
Miss Carita Stewart. That was my mother's older sister.
Yes, I heard a number of stories about her. She was very influential to a number of the young ladies. It was about her business.
Yes, she was.
All right. Now, let's talk about, now you were, of course, were a little bit younger. You were the same age as my sister and brother, the twins, so you weren't involved with the actual desegregation, but you came along soon after and started going to the majority white schools. What was your experience there?
It was about 2 years after desegregation, and John M. Langston had a special class for all the sixth graders who were preparing to go into the white schools, and it was a prep course. To sum it all up, they said that we have prepared you to compete, to excel, and to be the best. Don't you go to those schools and let anybody tell you that you don't know, and you can't learn, and you're not smart. And I remember Miss Lillian Brent, Miss Mercer, Floyd Gravitt, William Vollins, all of those people. I mean, it was no jokes. They didn't water it down for us, because it was a serious situation, because we were going to represent Halls Hill. And in no way did they want us to fail, in no way did they want us to cast a shadow upon all the people who will come behind us and disgrace the people that went before us, those pioneers that had gone before us. So when you go into that integrated situation, we went prepared, and they made sure they prepared us. So my experience was part of fear and anger and competitiveness. The fear came from the fact that there were certain parts of Stratford that you couldn't even be caught dead in if you were black. There's certain areas you didn't go unless you went together with somebody else. You don't want to be by yourself. Racism was rampant. Kids would look at you all kinds of ways, and teachers, but the teachers challenged us. And once they found out that we could learn, we didn't have much problems from them, because we showed that we could compete with the best of the class that they had. Athletics, we excelled. I played football and I played basketball. So it was a transition, and hey, I met a lot of friends. I was introduced to another culture, but I never forgot mine, because that was one of the things when you asked about my grandfather, culture, and you asked about my grandfather and my mother. Culture is one thing that was very big with them, and they taught it, and I learned it, and I carried that.
And you still carry it.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. So now let's talk about an area that my family wasn't so much involved in, but I remember you all as being leaders when I was a kid in things like the Black United Front and the like, when Reverend Moore came to Arlington.
Well, a lot of us had come back from HBCUs.
And you went to, tell them where you went, St.
I went
Aug.
to St. Augustine's College in Raleigh, North Carolina. So when we returned home during the summertime, it was at the height of the Civil Rights Movement. And we attended Callaway Methodist Church, who at the time was just like any other church. You didn't, as the expression is, we didn't raise much hell when we first went there. Reverend Monroe was one of my...
Well, other than desegregation.
Well, that's when it happened, because when Doug Moore came and was the pastor, he introduced us to the Black United Front. And with the Black United Front, we began to organize the community. Very radical times, standing up to the school system, standing up to the police, and standing up to the judges. But one thing that was good about it is that the guys that were on the street, we would go around and tell them, come on, go to church. to listen. And they never set foot in the church before. But when Doug Moore preached, everybody was there. And you would have people like Stokely Carmichael or H. Rap Brown or other people like that who would come and be guest speakers, and he would speak about them. But he allowed us to organize as a community. And with that organizing as a community, there was a lot of education with community organization and being community activists and being, well, you were radical from the beginning, but you're radical with a purpose, not just being radical to tear up things.
All right, I like that. Radical with a purpose. And that was wonderful to bring that, what I saw. Halls Hill was on the forefront of a lot of things, and we were even on the forefront of Black Power with Doug Moore coming into town and exposing the young people to all of those basically forward-thinking minds.
Well, see, I love that because during that time, part of my job with Sharon Brown, we were the playground directors. And as a matter of fact, you should remember your brother Wilma Jones. I got him to paint a Black Power fist on the back of the
I do remember on that wall.
On the wall.
It was silver and everything.
On the building in the middle of the playground. And we would go down Lee Highway and we'd ask all the businesses to contribute to our family days or community days. Safeway used to be up there. They'd give us hot dogs and hamburgers and hamburger buns. McDonald's would give us sodas. And all this was free because they didn't want any trouble from the kids in the neighborhood. And we knew that and we played on that. So when we had big community events, we didn't have to spend any money. We just had to go to these businesses and say, will you contribute to these activities? And they did.
And our families were supporting them. I mean, my father was at Safeway every Saturday.
And they knew that.
Absolutely. So let's, as we get ready to wrap it up, let's talk a little bit about, I guess, as you look back on Halls Hill, what are the things that you think that kind of made you kind of who you are? Because as I say in the book, in my Halls Hill family, that it was more than a neighborhood, and part of that, from my perspective, was the mindset and the families. But what is it from yours?
It's complicated because one thing that's never spoken about, and there was some good people, is Halls Hill had his drug era also, and it was very intense. As a matter of fact, I'm a recovering addict myself after 20 years of heroin addiction to be where I am, but there were people just like me who were addicted to drugs and the whole 9 yards. But one thing I'll say about it is, when we came through school, all those that were addicted to drugs, we knew how to read, we knew how to write, we read a book, and we were intelligent enough to know that once we got finished with all that, we could take a shower, kick the drugs, and go put on a suit and go apply for a job. But there are a lot of people that lost their lives, but we were still a community. There were people in the community who knew that a lot of us were struggling with drugs, but they never turned their backs on us. You know, they may have said, you know, I wish you all would stop. You all need to stop that. But if one of them were walking down the street and there was a group of us and the guys would be shooting crap on a corner or on the sidewalk and sitting there, they would stop what they were doing because the respect was always there. What I remember as Halls Hill as a community is that we were all connected. I could do something 2 streets over, and before I got home up Lee Highway at the top of the hill, somebody called my mother, and they're standing, and I'm wondering, who told? I remember one night, we were down by the playground, which was on Cameron Street, not the playground you have now, but this was a bigger playground. We were throwing rocks, and kids always throw rocks, so we were throwing rocks, and I think I hit John Watkins' house and cracked the storm door. It was dark. I knew I was in the clear, and there was a lot of us out there. So I go home, and as soon as I walk in the house, my mother says, "Why'd you throw that rock and break Mr. Watkins' window?" And I'm wondering who told on me. But they knew, and I had to pay. But
that's how it was.
That's
before,
how it was.
And they did it because they cared.
Oh, yes.
And I think that was the biggest piece. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time while you're in town to come and talk about your Halls Hill memories. And, much love. And I am so excited that you are excited about the project. And I'm going to try to keep on keeping on, getting more memories and things so that the folks who come behind us will remember how special Halls Hill was. What are your parting words for us, Sydney?
My parting words, I guess, we have to keep the memory alive, and we have to remember that those of us who grew here, even though there's a lot of gentrification that's going on, and not many of us are still here, this is not Highview Park for us. This is still Halls Hill. It'll always be Halls Hill until they dig, and as deep as they dig, and as deep as the ditch gets, and as big as the hole gets, it's still Halls Hill.
All right. Thanks so much. And I 100% agree with you.